Welcome to the Worldwise Wealth Podcast. In today's episode, I am interviewed by Robert of the Contrarian Capitalist. And in this episode, he really pulls out of me exactly why Latin America is the perfect plan B destination, whether you're looking for diversification, tax optimization, or residency or back pocket residency options. We dive into so much around Latin America, some of the best jurisdictions for living, for working, for tax optimization, for residencies in this episode. And I really share so much with him and his audience. So I wanted to share it with you as well. Let's dive into this episode.
It's always great to talk about Plan B and talk to people that travel internationally. And before we get on to Plan B, just a little bit more about yourself, your background, and some of the places that you've either visited and or lived in.
Yeah, absolutely. So a short snapshot of what it has looked like for me living abroad. I am originally from Canada, but almost a decade ago, I moved to China. Never really felt aligned with Canada, still figuring out why after so many years. But I moved to China. I really ended up enjoying my time there. Lived there for about 4 years through the duration of COVID. My life was based in China. And then in 2021, moved to Turkey, lived in Europe for a few years, and then went over to Mexico, where my partner is from. And then from there, we've been in Latin America since. So we've lived in most countries, most capital cities at this point of Latin America. And right now located in Asuncion in Paraguay, which I am very much so enjoying.
Yes, we were speaking off air about the fact that both of our partners, spouses, however, are Mexican. So it's a little it's a small world out there, to say the least. In terms of travel, because I know that there's people listening to this that are very seasoned travelers, there's gonna be some people listening to this that might have never been out of their own country. From my experience, traveling helped to certainly change me in a number of ways when I went, years ago. How do you feel that just the generic travel inside has helped shaped you into the person that you are today?
Yeah, I wish there was like one word to sum this up. It's interesting learning other languages. I feel like sometimes there's words in other languages where it's just one or two words and it really sums up the whole experience. But I don't think in English there is, but I have really found since traveling for such a long time, longer term, and liking to stay in destinations for now at least a month, if not a few months, to really understand the country, the culture, the people, the history. I find that travel has really changed my mindset. So when I think back to who I was in Canada so many years ago, I feel like living in one country, wherever it may be, you really only get a sense for that country, those people, and the viewpoints of what that country is. And also, of course, we have to include the viewpoints of the media that whether you want to or not, you really kind of end up consuming even in like coffee shops and on the drive to work. So I find that having traveled to so many different countries has really opened and expanded my mind and given me different perspectives around so many things. Of course, around the standard things when it comes to travel, like culture and history and people, but also around different things like politics and government. I know I mentioned to you previously that the other day I was out to lunch with a friend here, and she is Paraguayan. And so I was really not judgment, just being a very objective observer and asking her questions about what the government system is here and what people, the local Paraguayans, think of the government and the history and how they've come to power and the opposing party and who's voting these people in. And so it was really interesting to just hear a local on the ground perspective. And again, not have any judgment toward that. It's not my country. I don't have a right to vote. And I know that, but I really like to understand more of a local perspective when traveling. And I was not like this by any means when I first started traveling, but I think with time you really get enticed by these new cultures.
I think the one word that you used there that would sum it up quite well is mindset. And I think most people that even if it's just on a prolonged holiday, that go to somewhere a bit different, should we say, from what they're used to. I think that most people will come back with a change of perspective, shall we say, and I think that that helps to broaden the mind, broaden the horizons, and things like that, which is also important. So, point number one of this podcast was to emphasize that point that if you haven't yet traveled, you're thinking about traveling, trust us, it is definitely something worth doing. Immerse yourself, make yourself a bit uncomfortable in cultures that you might not have thought about before, if that makes sense. Moving on to Plan B then. Now, there's a lot of Plan B options around the world. Latin America is a bit of a hotspot at the moment, and Plan B could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. People could look these options with regard to a general lifestyle. They could look at these options with regard to purely numbers, i.e., is it tax efficient, good for business, etc., etc. Now, I appreciate there's a lot of countries around the world, but Central and South America uh, are, are the hotspot, shall we say, at the moment. Can we, if you can, however you want, whether it's country by country or lifestyle versus finance, a lot of countries to go through, a lot of different options. What attractive at the moment and why?
Yeah, loaded question, but a great question. So you're correct. There are many different countries in Latin America now that are increasingly becoming more interesting. We see more so from a Western perspective. A lot of Western clients, Canadians, Americans, Australians, are wanting maybe to relocate abroad, relocate themselves, their family abroad, but maybe to just have a back pocket option where it can be a call option in the future if something crazy happens like it has in the past. You can that you hold residency to go and live in that country without needing to be on a tourist visa. Europe historically has had a lot of these interesting options, but it's becoming increasingly more and more restrictive, and minimums are getting higher. Wait times are increasing, policies are changing somewhat frequently in a lot of these countries. So Latin America is very interesting to many. I don't see that being something that's going to last forever, but I think for the next 5, 10 years, there is going to be an influx of options where you can fairly straightforwardly obtain residency, banking options, working your way to citizenship via naturalization in Latin America. So some of the interesting jurisdictions that we work in are Panama, and we'll go through some of these in more detail. Argentina is a big one, Paraguay, Uruguay, Mexico, there, Brazil for the right investor for if that is what you're looking for, more so from a naturalization route. But there are some countries in Latin America that are what we call territorial tax countries. So meaning that unless you're making locally sourced income in said country, which is essentially income from the local economy, you have clients from that country, or let's say you have a local business or a local shop. That's locally sourced income. If you're making income from outside the country is not worried about taxing you on that money. So Paraguay is an interesting one to many people where I'm based now, not for tax purposes for a few different reasons, but it's interesting. We came here for the first time about 3 or 4 years ago, and the influx of foreigners that we see in the foreigner areas, it's quite striking. You hear English in the foreigner-dominated areas, much, much more than we did a few years ago. So I think that's increasingly becoming a hotspot here. And then, of course, Panama, we do a lot with crypto banking in Panama, so that can be having your funds offshore, whether you still have accounts in your home country or looking to move everything into a banking beneficial jurisdiction. Or like I said, bringing your crypto potentially tax free with the right strategies into a jurisdiction like Panama. Argentina is interesting for many people, as is Peru. Argentina has somewhat of a stronger passport, the travel document, but in terms of working your way towards citizenship by naturalization in a couple years. So there are many interesting options in Latin America, and that's more so from a tax perspective. But of course, there's also the lifestyle perspective. So that is really where you're wanting to spend time. And for a lot of clients, we really encourage them to come to Latin America, to travel, to spend some time in these countries because We've had clients before where we got them set up, we get them tax optimized, and then they find out down the line that they really enjoy living in this other country in Latin America, but it's not tax optimized and they're going to be living there longer term. So they're paying taxes there, and then we have to start planning all of that. Not that it is a problem, but it does just require more work and potentially paying more in taxes down the line, just depending on where you're living. But there are many countries in Latin America that are beautiful. We have a lot of clients going to Guatemala right now. I personally love, I mean, I guess that's Central America, but I personally love Peru. I think everything about Peru is just so enticing to me. But a lot of clients also like Argentina. So it just really depends on what it is that you are looking for and the lifestyle that you're wanting to build.
And that goes hand in hand with what we said at the start, where it is all about start with the end in mind. So if you are approaching it from a very internationalized process, i.e., I've got X, Y, and Z in this country, I've got A, B, and C in this country, I'd like to go somewhere where it's very tax friendly, then the chances are you're going to be choosing the location that might be completely different than if you, I don't know, like the life of carne asada, or the food down in Argentina, or the amount of historical things and the wonderful people of Peru. Now, I can say that because, like yourself, I've traveled around various parts of Central and South America, so I can say that with volition. In fact, I'm even, for those watching the video, I'm even wearing my llamas that I bought back in Peru in 2014. So Peru's a fantastic country from a traveling perspective. In terms of, just want to go back on territorial tax, and again, what you say is correct at the time of recording. These things can always change. So, what countries apart from Paraguay that you mentioned at the moment have that system where they're only fussed about locally sourced income, not the international aspect?
Yeah, so Panama is another one that's currently territorial taxation that we work within. Uruguay also is. Uruguay is a little bit trickier for most if you're looking to actually live there full time and benefit from the tax optimization. So typically, Panama, Paraguay, they both have different aspects in terms of lifestyle. But just depending on what you're looking for, some are stronger in the areas of banking or the ease of obtaining residency or the documentation that's needed beforehand. So it just depends on really what it is you're looking for in the holistic picture.
And am I right in saying that? Well, last time I checked in, does Panama offer dual citizenship, or is that one of the countries that doesn't? I forgot what their rules are.
Yeah, they do. It's a common misconception that they don't, but we have quite a few American clients who are working their way, some who have already obtained citizenship by naturalization, of course, from living there and really becoming part of the local culture and economy, but they do offer dual citizenship.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks for clarifying that. That's myth number one, I think, busted, which is really good. I appreciate there's going to be a whole wide range of people listening to this in different situations. Some people listening are going to be potentially millionaires or have a lot of things in the bank or whatever it might be. And some people might not have even thought about plan B. So if someone has not been thinking about plan B and they are thinking that they might want to make a change, from your experience, is it a case of number one, possibly having a consultation, just to get a feel for an idea in a place first? But would you always say to people that if someone, for example, wanted to move to or thinks about plan B and thinks Peru, let's just take a country at random, would you then say, well, rather than just go ahead with the process, unless this person wanted to, actually get down to the country, maybe take a couple of weeks holiday? What would your generic advice be in that situation, Nicole?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, most, I will say, most of the clients that come to us for a consult, the main goal is tax optimization. And we always look at the medium to long term. We're not typically setting up short term solutions when it comes
Mm.
to company formations and trust and tax optimization. But That is usually what we see, and then the lifestyle will follow. Now, Latin America, all very different countries, but you kind of know what to expect in general from the lifestyle in this continent, in South America. But that's typically what we see. We do usually say to clients, if you are wanting to actually live in said country, whether it be Peru or Argentina or Panama, longer term, and you're not just looking to stay there for a bit and travel and kind of work that system. If you're actually wanting to live somewhere, visit, most clients have usually multiple times, but be sure that that is a country that you actually enjoy. Maybe if you're not spending time there now, perhaps in the future you may want to. You already hold residency, you want to work your way toward the citizenship, live there for a few years. So it's tricky as it's different for every client, but typically, if you have never been to Latin America at all, definitely go, definitely come and travel and see what it's like. But like I said, most people have at some point, and then there are some residency programs as well, where sometimes the officers will want to see that you have been to the country before they will grant you residency. So it really just depends on the country or countries that you're looking to get into.
Fair enough. Thanks for breaking that down. Another Going back to Panama myths, actually, myth number two, people might think that Plan B and the requirements are actually very expensive when that might not be the case. I know from experience in Mexico, no, I always say I love my wife dearly. I really, really do. One of the advantages of marrying a citizen from Mexico was that there were pretty much no requirement for me for temporary residency visa. It was a case of file, do some paperwork, some generic paperwork. No financial requirements were requested, which is a massive difference if you're doing it from a family perspective in Mexico rather than just applying. Uh, I'm waffling. My point being, though, that some people might think that, you know what, I need to be earning $5,000 a month or whatever it is, and these programs could be quite expensive. It's not always the case. If you're able to give, again, at the time of recording, what you say is going to be correct, just a couple of examples of some rough numbers that people might need in order to seriously think about Plan B.
Yeah, definitely. So it depends really. I break it down on if we are looking at just residency or if you're really wanting to tax optimize your business. Potentially, you're bringing your business from the US into another jurisdiction. You're setting up personal and corporate banking. You're getting into a credit system in another country. Very beneficial. Um, so typically, programs I would say on the lower end, if you are looking for assistance, which will usually speed up the process in a lot of these countries. It usually starts at between 3 to 5,000. Everything is in USD, so very affordable if you are looking for a residency where you can simply hold for the rest of your life. Maybe you don't even need to be living in that country full time or part time. You can simply go and visit once every year, once every 2 years, maybe once every 3 or 4 years to keep that active if you have PR. But that's more so from the residency front. I mean, it also does depend on how you're looking to qualify. We work with a lot of countries where there are very straightforward ways to qualify, and that is the pricing I just mentioned. But there are some workarounds on how you can qualify. And if you really are wanting to get into a certain country, there may be options, but it's likely going to require a little bit more capital in order to get in. Depending if the goal is just residency or if you're wanting to live there and get citizenship, then it's very much so worth it to spend maybe 20, $30,000. And then for company formations, I mean, it very much so depends again on the jurisdiction, but usually starts at between 5 to 10,000 and then can increase from there just depending on many different factors, accounting, nominee directors, how you're wanting to hold it and set it up, if it's within that same jurisdiction, if you're holding it within the US. So there's a lot of factors that go into that, but you're right. It can be extremely affordable to get started, just get an option in your back pocket, start with a residency, and then work your way toward tax optimization in time.
Yes, and every country's going to have different requirements with different criteria, and everything's going to be completely different. This is where the emphasis is on again, people that are thinking about Plan B need to put some time and effort into figuring out what the end goal is and why, and then pretty much I would say start there and then work backwards, and that should help. really what plan B can be is it doesn't have to be, you need millions in the bank and then you can go and do X, Y, and Z. Where with the area that we're talking about now, actually, as you say, anywhere between 3 to 5 thousand USD as a starting point, that I imagine would be quite affordable for most, if not everyone, listening to this podcast or video.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it really depends on going back to the lifestyle component as well, right? So if it's just going to be a back pocket solution, you're going back to live in your home country, that's totally fine. You can definitely do that. But there's also the option where maybe you want to live part time in this country or you want to live full time most of the year in this country. And I think you and I both know, actually, I don't know pricing in North America anymore. It's been so long since I lived there, but you and I both know pricing in South America and what that looks like. And I do see, having traveled here for quite a few years now, I do see inflation in a lot of these countries, but it's not staggering inflation. Prices do go up, but it's still very affordable to live and live well. I can easily spend, a few thousand per month in Paraguay, and I have paddle lessons every week, and you go to the gym and you eat great steaks. I mean, the food here is
Mhm.
incredible. But there's so much you can do on what I imagine is a small budget here, but I assume that would take quite a bit more money somewhere like in North America.
Yeah, and I think that's the joy of internationalization is that, I mean, I certainly look at everything in pound coins. And, despite being in Mexico, I mean, even from being here in 2023, it was about 21 pesos to a pound, which was quite expensive relatively. And then at the moment, at the time of recording this, is about 26 and a half. So already without me having to do anything, and again, using pound coins, it's already what, 20, 25%, maybe 30%, uh, just under 30% cheaper. And I use that term loosely. So I think that's the joys of internationalization, also depending on the currency that you're looking at as well. And Nicole, obviously we've touched upon temporary residency, permanent residency. I appreciate it varies from country to country. One thing that seems to also be quite popular, and again depends on the country, is uh, giving birth in a country in order to gain naturalization. Is that something you and Worldwise Capital, your business, is that something you deal with quite a lot, or is it more people just looking for more of a business point of view?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the last, I would say even 10, 12 months, we've seen quite an uptick in what we call birth tourism, specific to Latin America. Most of the countries here will have some sort of option to give birth in the country. And then, of course, the child gains immediate citizenship because they are born in that country. And then it varies based on every individual country on the wait time for the parents to obtain citizenship. Usually it requires you living there for a few years, yes, but you get immediate residency as the parent of a child who's born in that country. So this is definitely something that when we consult clients with looking for residency plan B options, down the line looking for company formation options offshore, that we get a lot of questions about. Where are some good options to give birth? Of course, there's so many considerations that go into that, where it typically requires another consult because they want to know what is the healthcare system like? What's the price point going to be in the healthcare system? Is there insurance that I can get? There's so many questions surrounding this. And when you're looking at 10 plus jurisdictions in Latin America where you could have an option for this, it can definitely be daunting, but it's something that we do work through with clients to figure out what would make sense for them, what makes sense from the residency and citizenship perspective, but also from the lifestyle perspective of actually having to give birth elsewhere.
Yeah, that's fair enough, because I know that it's something that people will think about. I know that myself, it's something I've been thinking about, not the giving birth aspect personally, but certainly from a family unit point of view. So that again, that's just one of those, probably better to do that in a different country. And then that gives said unborn child or children, depending on how many you have, extra options because they're going to have a father that's from country X, a mother that's from country Y. And of course, they're going to be in country Z with that. So you effectively, create an option, which I think is very useful. just to wrap up, because I know there's going to be people that are listening that are going to be thinking, well, there's so many great places in other parts of the world that you haven't spoken about. And I think the main reason for that is not that we don't like other places. I mean, for example, Thailand is just one of those places where you can go once and you just want to keep going back. It's a delightful, delightful country. But the reason we focused on Latin America is number one, we both got experience. Obviously, Nicole, more so yourself with what you do with Worldwise Capital. But from a geopolitical point of view, if we look at everything that's going on in the world at the moment, and let's just take it continent by continent. Well, the continent of Europe is knackered. I'm going to use that term politely. And that's probably going to get worse before it gets better. So that's why we've not looked at Europe. Africa, there's probably a couple of countries in there that would be quite good. But again, a lot of, I think, socio-economic and generic economic issues in Africa. So we've not really touched on Africa. Oceania, I think, as you alluded to at the start, most people are looking to get out of there and go somewhere else. So we've not touched upon that. And if we look at Asia, and I appreciate that's a big continent to talk about, again, there's some great countries there, but looking at potential world tensions, if something kicked off, might not be the best place in general to be in. Similar to an extent with North America, but again, as you alluded to, if you are a US citizen or even a Canadian citizen, the chances are you're looking to get out of those countries rather than go to those countries. Antarctica is Antarctica. I'm not sure of any residency programs for there. So therefore, when you break that all down, you're left with Latin America. Hence why we've been talking about that today, because of all the continents at the moment, given how things are, it's probably the most secure continent from a generic geopolitical point of view. I just thought I'd make that point clear just in case, people were wondering why we've not touched upon some other great countries around the world.
Yeah, and I appreciate you making that distinction. Like I said at the beginning, I think Latin America and what we see from the needs that clients are wanting is very much so up and coming in a holistic approach. Residency, citizenship, birth tourism, company formation, banking, crypto. And it's still very unregulated in a sense, probably won't last forever, and still very open and free countries, a lot of these countries. There are some programs in Europe we work with. There are some programs in Asia we work with. Usually clients will come to us and they know they want these programs. Like we said, they know they love Thailand. And that is when we work from the lifestyle perspective first. And then, okay, what are your options to get into Thailand, maybe to start naturalizing in time in Thailand? But that's more of a lifestyle perspective, and that has its own set of costs and pros and cons. But the lifestyle perspective is important. Of course, building this lifestyle for yourself, the lifestyle you've built and that I've built, it is something that you want to tax optimize when it comes to business, but the lifestyle component is very important as well. So all of that to say, it looks very different for every individual client, but Latin America is where we see a lot of interest right now.
No, totally agree. And it's certainly people that follow my work at contrariancapitalist.com, I should say. Yeah, they will know that although British born, currently based in Mexico, yeah, they will know that South America is certainly on my radar, and it's probably something that I will press with moving forward. That being said, I appreciate this podcast and video might actually be out on two channels. So what I'll do is, for those listening to this on Contrarian Capitalist podcast, Nicole, you tell us a bit more about how people can find you, and then I'll probably do the same for people that listen to this on your websites and podcast.
Yeah, perfect. So we have a blog and YouTube are the main channels. So Worldwise Capital for YouTube, if you're looking at any residency options, solutions for company formation, citizenships, there's a lot of options that we go over and review on the YouTube channel. And then all of the services, all of the jurisdictions that we work in are online at worldwisecapital.com. And then we also have recently started a blog at workwealthandtravel.com where we document what it's like to live in Paraguay. I think we have 35 articles up right now, just going in detail of pricing, supermarkets, life of Paraguay, everything of what you can expect, apartment hunting. If you are looking to relocate here, eventually that'll expand to all of Latin America. I've traveled, unfortunately, to most of it, but didn't really travel doing things as a local in blog style. So we'll have to go back, do those travels again, and then that'll be up on the blog as well.
Fantastic. And for those that are, again, on contrariancapitalist.substack.com, I'll make reference to those websites and on YouTube where this video will be. I'll make sure you're tagged in. And then for those listening from the other side, yes, my name's Rob Smallbone, host of the Contrarian Capitalist podcast, also contrariancapitalist.substack.com, where we will talk a lot about Plan B and actually put these things into action. We don't just talk about it, we like to do what we say and say what we do. And also a lot of talk about markets, gold, silver, uh, all of these sorts of things. So yeah, do head over to contrariancapitalist.substack.com. It's a nice mixture of not just podcasts, but a lot of informative and written content as well. Nicole, well, thank you very much for your time today. My last question would be, is there anything or any country or any place or anything we haven't covered so far that you think people need to know about before we sign off?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like we've covered a lot of these jurisdictions if we're talking about Latin America, to enough of a degree, I think, where if someone's interested, they can look into it further, they can book a call, they can go to our website, YouTube channel. I mean, there's a lot we haven't covered here, but that would take probably a few hours. But I think this is a good overview if somebody is looking for a plan B.
Fantastic. And I would say the final thing I would say is if there's enough feedback about maybe deep diving into a certain country, whether it's from a travel and residency point of view, again, I'd certainly be happy to come back in and share experiences. I'm sure you would as well. So again, any feedback, any comments, I'm sure we could possibly look at a round two moving forward, if that sounds okay to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And whose ever channel you're watching this on or potentially listening, but I guess if you're on YouTube, comment below and we'll keep that in mind for any jurisdictions that you may be interested in. We can always discuss that further.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, Nicole, I really enjoyed that. I think there's a lot of information there, a lot of food for thought. And again, it's all about people taking action because, they want to and to help protect themselves against all the craziness of the world. So, yeah, thank you for taking time out today and look forward to catching up in the future.